You have met people who never raise their voice, never make a scene, and never threaten you outright. Yet somehow, the room bends around them. Plans adjust. Opinions soften. You find yourself giving in without ever being asked directly. You might even tell yourself you are just being reasonable, just keeping the peace. But if you look closely, a pattern appears. You change first. You apologize first. You compromise first. On the surface, they seem calm, composed, even kind. Inside, an invisible game is being played. Not with shouting, not with force, but with absence, with silence. With the quiet suggestion that crossing them will cost you something you do not want to lose. Most people imagine dominance as loud. The one who talks the most, demands the most, takes up the most space. But some of the strongest forms of control are almost completely silent. No rules are spoken, no threats are made. You simply learn, over time, what you are allowed to do and what you are not. In this video, you will see 4 patterns of silent dominance that may already be shaping your relationships. The smile that sets the rules, the weaponized quiet, the invisible ledger of favors and guilt, and the slow, quiet erasing of your own voice. By the end, you will not just understand how these patterns work. You will start to recognize where you have been bending yourself around someone else's silence, and what it might mean to stop. The world we live in rewards visibility, loud confidence, bold statements, charismatic speeches. We are trained to look for power in the person at the front of the stage. But in everyday life, the people who influence us most deeply rarely stand under a spotlight. They are in our families, our friendships, our workplaces. They do not need a title, a position, or a raised voice. What they control is more subtle: attention, emotional safety, access, approval. Things you cannot see but feel the absence of immediately. Silent dominance is not a mystical trait. It is a pattern of behavior built on how humans respond to social reward and punishment. How we fear disconnection, how we hate feeling uncertain. When someone quietly learns to control those levers, they can guide others without appearing to do anything at all. This matters because silent dominance is easy to miss until you are deeply entangled. You may think you are being considerate, keeping the peace, or not making it a big deal. But underneath, you are adjusting yourself, again and again, around one person's emotional climate. To see this clearly, we'll start with the most deceptive form of all, the smile that seems harmless, but quietly sets the rules. There is a type of smile that does not feel warm, even when it looks perfect. The lips curve, the eyes soften just enough. But something in you knows, this smile is not about connection, it is about control. Picture this. You share an opinion that slightly challenges someone you care about. You expect a debate, perhaps even a small disagreement. Instead, they smile. Not a large, genuine smile, but a contained one, polite. Cold at the edges. They say, "It's fine. You can think what you want." No argument, no raised voice. Just a smile and a sentence that sounds tolerant but feels like a warning. That moment buries itself in your mind. Because human beings are wired to read micro-expressions, tiny signals that tell us whether we are safe or not. When words say, "It is fine," but the body says, "You are crossing a line," your nervous system believes the body. So you learn. You learn that certain opinions are technically allowed, but emotionally expensive. You learn that you can disagree, but you will pay for it in subtle ways. Fewer messages, slower responses, less warmth, less validation. This is how silent rules are written. Not on paper, not in explicit conversations. They live in the space between the smiling mouth and the distant eyes. Have you experienced this? Someone tells you, "I'm not upset," while their entire presence says the opposite. You feel guilty and uneasy, but you cannot point to any clear wrongdoing. There is no scene to describe, nothing dramatic to retell. Just a sense that you have stepped into a territory where you do not quite belong. Silent dominance thrives in this ambiguity. When expectations are unspoken, you cannot challenge them directly. You cannot say, "That rule is unfair," if no one has ever acknowledged that the rule exists. So instead of confronting the pattern, you adapt to it. You smooth yourself down. You dull the edges of your personality. You pick safer topics, make safer jokes, take safer positions. The result is quiet self-erasure. You remain in the relationship, but less of you shows up. The other person remains kind, reasonable, never angry, while your internal world grows smaller and more constrained. Awareness begins with naming what is really happening. When a smile is not a bridge, but a barrier. When it's fine is a locked door with no handle. You are not obligated to decode someone's hidden displeasure. Healthy relationships make room for discomfort, disagreement, and honest reactions. Silent dominance, in contrast, punishes authenticity while pretending to be calm. Awareness begins with naming what is really happening. When a smile is not a bridge, but a barrier. When it's fine is a locked door with no handle. But what happens when there is no smile at all, when instead of polite reassurance, you are met with nothing, no reply, no warmth? Just a quiet that makes you want to fix everything, even if you did nothing wrong. That is where the next pattern hides. The weaponized quiet. Silence can be healing. There are moments when stepping back, saying less, and taking time to think are signs of emotional maturity. But there is another kind of quiet that does not feel peaceful at all. It feels like a verdict. Imagine you share a vulnerable truth with someone. You admit a fear, a past mistake, a need you rarely voice. Instead of responding, they go quiet. Minutes pass. Hours. The conversation ends without closure. You replay what you said. Was it too much? Too intense? Too demanding? You begin to feel exposed. Later, you reach out again. You check in. You apologize just in case, even if you are not sure what you did wrong. Eventually, they respond, neutral and composed. I just needed space. Maybe they did. Maybe the silence was emotional regulation, not intentional punishment. But here is where the line blurs. If this pattern repeats, and you are always the one reaching out, always the one trying to repair, silence becomes more than a pause. It becomes pressure. You learn that their quiet is not just absence. It is a statement. You went too far. You disappointed them. You should fix it. Silent dominance often uses withdrawal as its primary language. Not blocking, not dramatic exits, but a careful reduction of presence. Longer response times. Shorter replies. Less eye contact. Less enthusiasm. Humans are deeply social. We are wired to find exclusion painful. In fact, the brain regions activated by social rejection overlap with those activated by physical pain. So when someone important to you turns down their presence, your nervous system reacts as if something is wrong, even if no words are spoken. Have you ever noticed how much you are willing to do just to avoid someone's cold silence? How quickly you offer reassurance, apologies, or concessions, even when you are not sure you did anything wrong? That is not weakness. It is evidence of how powerful social disconnection feels to the brain. The ethical problem arises when someone realizes that their silence gets results. Instead of saying, "This bothered me, can we talk about it?" they simply pull away. They do not need to explain. They let you feel the consequences until you come back on their terms. Over time, you begin to walk carefully around them. You anticipate potential triggers and avoid them. You become hyper-aware of their mood, their responsiveness, their small shifts in engagement. This hypervigilance is exhausting. You may think you are being considerate, but what you are really doing is unconsciously serving someone else's emotional comfort at the expense of your own. Healthy space is communicated. Silent dominance is implied. The difference is simple. In healthy dynamics, silence is explained. In dominant dynamics, silence is used as a mirror for you to see your own fear of loss. If you notice this pattern in your life, ask yourself quietly, do I feel free to bring up uncomfortable topics without being punished by distance? Do I feel like my needs are allowed to exist? Or do I brace for withdrawal every time I voice them? Healthy space is communicated. Silent dominance is implied. The difference is simple. In healthy dynamics, silence is explained. In dominant dynamics, silence is used as a mirror for you to see your own fear of loss. But not all quiet control feels cold. Sometimes it feels generous, helpful, even selfless. The pressure does not come from what they withhold. It comes from everything they give, and the guilt you feel when you cannot keep up. That is the next pattern, the invisible ledger. Some people never seem rattled. They stay composed in arguments, measured in conflict, almost impossible to provoke. On the surface, this looks like emotional mastery. And sometimes it is, but calm can also be a form of dominance. Especially when it is used to make other people feel unreasonable, unstable, or overly emotional by comparison. Imagine a disagreement where you are visibly upset. Your voice wavers, your heart is racing. You struggle to find the right words. Across from you sits someone who remains perfectly still. Their tone is level, even slightly detached. They say things like, "You're overreacting," or "Let's be rational about this," or "I don't understand why you're getting so emotional." Suddenly, the conflict is no longer about the issue itself. It is about your reaction. You begin to feel ashamed for feeling what you feel. You second-guess your own perception of the situation. This is a psychological trap. When one person claims the role of the calm one, they often also claim the role of the reasonable one, the objective one, the one who sees things clearly. Your emotions become evidence against you rather than information about your experience. Silent dominance thrives here, in the quiet framing of who is rational and who is not. The person who seems unshakable positions themselves as the judge of what counts as a valid response. You either calm down to match them, or your emotions are used to discredit your point entirely. Have you felt this? You bring up something that hurt you, and instead of engaging with the content, the other person dissects your tone, your timing, your emotional state. You leave the conversation feeling not only unheard, but also somehow guilty for feeling anything at all. This form of dominance is subtle because it hides inside traits we praise: self-control, composure, not making drama. But there is a difference between being calm as an act of care and being calm as a way to stay above the conversation, untouchable and unaccountable. Healthy calm says, "I'm grounded, and I want us both to feel safe enough to be honest." Dominant calm says, "I'm grounded, and your emotions prove you are the problem." When this pattern repeats, a familiar outcome appears. You silence yourself. You pre-edit your words so you do not seem too sensitive. You minimize your pain before you even speak it aloud. Silent dominance does not always require silence. Sometimes it speaks, but with such cool detachment that your feelings melt away under its gaze. You are not being heard. You are being managed. Awareness here means reclaiming the right to have an emotional reaction, without it invalidating your perspective. You are allowed to be upset and still be reasonable. You are allowed to shake, to stutter, to cry, and still be telling the truth. You are allowed to be upset and still be reasonable. You are allowed to shake, to stutter, to cry, and still be telling the truth. When someone's calmness becomes a weapon that makes you doubt your own reality, you are not being heard. You are being managed, but calm and silence are not the only tools. Sometimes the most powerful form of control is not in how someone behaves in conflict. It is in how much they help you outside of it, until you no longer feel free to choose for yourself. That quiet weight of obligation is where the invisible ledger begins to write itself. Not all silent dominance comes from coldness. Sometimes it comes disguised as generosity. Think of someone who is always doing things for you. They help you with tasks, offer resources, give advice, make sacrifices. They rarely say no. They appear endlessly accommodating, almost selfless. You feel grateful. You might even feel lucky. But slowly, another feeling begins to grow beneath the gratitude. Pressure. You start to sense that every favor has been quietly recorded somewhere. There is no spoken agreement, no clear transaction, but a ledger exists, not on paper, in the air between you. When you cannot reciprocate, when you set a boundary, or when you simply say no, their energy shifts. They may not argue. They may not accuse you. Instead, they sigh softly, withdraw a little, or say something like, "It's okay, I understand," in a way that feels anything but okay. Your mind fills in the blanks. After everything they've done for me, how can I disappoint them? How can I say no, when they have said yes so many times? This is where silent dominance takes hold. You no longer make decisions based on what is right for you. You make them based on avoiding the guilt of failing this person. Have you noticed yourself saying yes to things you do not want, simply because you fear becoming ungrateful? Have you caught yourself thinking, "I owe them," even though no one has ever spoken those words aloud? Humans are wired for reciprocity. We feel an internal drive to balance what we receive with what we give. This is not inherently bad. It is what makes cooperation possible. But when someone leans heavily on this instinct, giving in ways that create quiet obligation, they can steer your choices without ever explicitly asking. The ethical difference is intention and clarity. Healthy generosity is given freely, with no expectation that you shape your life around it. Silent dominance gives in a way that is difficult to refuse, then uses your sense of debt as leverage. You may hear phrases like, "I'm not asking for anything in return. I just want to help. Don't worry about me." But underneath, you feel that your independence is shrinking. Over time, you might notice that your decisions are less and less your own. Where you spend your time, who you prioritize, which opportunities you take or turn down. The price of saying no feels higher than the cost of saying yes. So you say yes, again and again. Awareness here means recognizing when gratitude has quietly turned into obligation. You are allowed to appreciate someone's help without letting it dictate your boundaries. You are allowed to receive care and still make choices that they do not like. Real connection does not demand silent repayment. It allows you to be thankful and autonomous at the same time. Real connection does not demand silent repayment. It allows you to be thankful and autonomous at the same time. But when you live too long under someone else's quiet expectations, something deeper starts to shift. It is not just your decisions that change. It is your sense of who you are allowed to be. You stop noticing how much you edit yourself. You stop noticing how small you have become. That is the most dangerous effect of silent dominance. Not just the control they hold over you, but the version of you that slowly disappears in response. That is where we go next. Silent dominance is not just about the dominant person. It is also about what happens inside you over time. At first, the changes are small. You adjust a sentence here, leave out a detail there, avoid one topic at dinner. These decisions feel minor, even wise. Why create tension, you tell yourself, when you can keep everything smooth? But patterns are built one small decision at a time. Soon, your conversations with this person start to feel carefully curated. You share less of what might upset them. You reduce your needs to the minimum. You hide your anger, your confusion, your disappointment. Have you ever noticed how your personality seems to shrink around certain people? You are louder and more alive with some, quieter and more careful with others. That difference is not random. It is a map of where you have learned it is safe to be yourself, and where you have learned it is not. Silent dominance teaches you, slowly and subtly, to become a version of yourself that is easier for the other person to manage. Less honest, less demanding, less inconvenient. The psychological cost is quiet but profound. You may begin to feel disconnected from your own preferences. When asked what you want, you hesitate. You have spent so long adapting to someone else's needs that your own feel blurry. This can lead to resentment. Not always loud resentment, but a lingering sense of being unseen, unvalued, or taken for granted. You might struggle to name why you feel this way, because nothing obviously bad has happened. There are no explosive fights, no dramatic betrayals, no clear villains. Instead, there is a history of small self-abandonments. Moments where you silenced your own discomfort to maintain a fragile peace. Moments where you felt that speaking up would cost you too much. If this sounds familiar, pause for a moment and consider. When did you learn that your emotions were too much? Who taught you, through silence or subtle disapproval, that your full self was a problem to be managed? Silent dominance often survives because the people subjected to it blame themselves. They call themselves oversensitive, dramatic, needy. They do not see that their reactions are actually signals of a deeper imbalance. Awareness is not about turning every quiet person into a villain. It is about noticing when the quiet around you consistently demands your self-erasure. You are allowed to exist in full volume. You are allowed to be with people who do not make you feel like a burden for being honest. Silent dominance often survives because the people subjected to it blame themselves. Silent dominance often survives because the people subjected to it blame themselves. They call themselves oversensitive, dramatic, needy. They do not see that their reactions are actually signals of a deeper imbalance. Awareness is not about turning every quiet person into a villain. It is about noticing when the quiet around you consistently demands your self-erasure. It is about noticing when the quiet around you consistently demands your self-erasure. The question then becomes, what do you do with this knowledge? How do you protect yourself without becoming manipulative in return? How do you step out of the game without having to destroy the entire table? To answer that, we need to talk about power, ethics, and boundaries. Understanding silent dominance is not an invitation to play the same game. It is an invitation to step out of it. Every human relationship contains power of some kind. Influence, emotional leverage, economic resources, social connections. We cannot escape these dynamics. What we can do is become conscious of them. The goal is not to learn how to dominate quietly. The goal is to recognize when your behavior, or someone else's, is shaping another person's freedom in ways that feel hidden and unfair, Ask yourself, do I ever withhold affection, attention, or communication to get a specific reaction from someone? Do I stay calm in conflict, not to help the situation, but to make the other person feel irrational? Do I give more than I say, then feel angry when others do not repay me in the way I imagined? These questions are not accusations, they are mirrors. We have all, at some point, used silence, withdrawal, or subtle pressure to cope or to cope badly. What matters is what we choose to do once we see it. Healthy alternatives do not require becoming loud, aggressive, or confrontational. They require clarity. Instead of weaponized silence, there is communicated space. I'm feeling overwhelmed. I need some time to think, but I care about this and I want to come back to it. Instead of quiet punishment, there is direct honesty. When that happened, I felt hurt. Can we talk about it? Instead of invisible ledgers, there are boundaries around giving. I'm happy to help with this, but I won't always be able to. I don't expect anything in return. And instead of using calmness to dominate, there is shared responsibility for emotional safety. I want us both to feel heard. Your feelings matter. Let's slow down and try to understand each other. Protecting yourself from silent dominance does not mean cutting off everyone who is quiet or emotionally reserved. It means paying attention to patterns. Do you feel smaller around them? Less authentic? More anxious about displeasing them than you are about losing yourself? Healthy relationships might still include tension, misunderstandings, and emotional distance at times. But over the long term, they move in the direction of more openness, more safety, more room for both people to be human. Silent dominance, in contrast, narrows that room. You adapt. You contort. You learn to move around invisible rules that no one will admit exist. Awareness gives you a choice: to participate in that game, or to start gently stepping out of it. Look back over the relationships in your life. Not just the obvious ones, the loud conflicts. The intense connections, but the quiet ones that sit at the center of your daily routines. Who do you soften your words around? Who do you avoid disappointing at all costs? With whom do you feel a subtle pressure to be agreeable, calm, easy? You may not see shouting, insults, or threats. But you may feel the weight of expectations, of emotional debts, of unspoken rules. You may feel that parts of you have gone silent just to keep the atmosphere smooth. It can be unsettling to realize how much of your behavior has been shaped by other people's quiet power. But there is also a strange relief in it. Because if you have adapted yourself to fit someone else's emotional comfort, you can also start to reclaim that space. This does not require a confrontation scene, a dramatic goodbye, or a sudden rebellion. Often, it starts with very small acts of honesty. Answering a question truthfully, even if your answer might disappoint. Letting a silence happen without rushing to fill it with apology. Saying, "That didn't feel good to me," instead of swallowing it for the sake of peace. You might be surprised by what happens. Some relationships will tighten, becoming more real and less performative. Others will strain under the weight of your authenticity, revealing that what held them together was not respect, but your compliance. Either way, you are no longer living entirely under someone else's silent gravity. You are beginning to create your own. The psychology of silent dominance is not just about them. It is also about you, your fear of loss, your hunger for acceptance, your willingness to trade pieces of yourself for the illusion of stability. The more you see these patterns, the less power they have. Dominance that depends on your confusion cannot survive your clarity. In the end, the quietest shift is also the most radical, not changing them. Just finally deciding that your voice will no longer be the only one that stays quiet. The most powerful silence in your life does not have to be someone else's. It can be the calm, steady decision inside you that says, "I see what is happening. I will not pretend I don't. And I will not disappear to keep the peace."